Hello out there, and today we're going to be taking a look at an extremely budget-friendly knife from Kershaw, and this one is called the Tarheel, the 1364. And real quick, guys, if you are watching the channel, you probably noticed a lot recently of the new CRKTs, a lot of stuff that's in like the budget-friendly kind of range. There will be some new stuff coming very soon that is sort of more outside that range, a little more variety to the channel coming. You know, I really can't dictate what knives get released when and what stuff I'm interested in, but there is a Benchmade coming out very soon that I'll be getting my hands on, a new case knife as well, the new flipper actually, the shark tooth, so some things are in the works. And again, when the new Spyderco models come out, I'll be trying to get my hands on those as well. So stay tuned for all that. But today we are staying in the budget realm with a very interesting knife here, because this is one that was released in 2019 but had zero fanfare, no kind of marketing that I was aware of. You know, I watch all the SHOT Show videos, the new rollout videos, and this knife was not included in any of them. You know, but it is a really cheap knife that I came across on Amazon, and by cheap I mean budget friendly, but it isn't necessarily the best built knife either, and we'll get back to that, especially comparing it to the other Kershaws, because this video, at least I think, is relevant on the back of the previous video about steel that I did, because it really will highlight the discussion and the debate about what 8CR13 is worth, because you can definitely get it for really cheap, $15.50 right here. All right, but let's do some size comparisons, talk about the details of the knife, and at the end I'll give you a little bit of a rundown of my take on the value and who I think this knife is going to be for. All right, but starting with the overall size, so what we have is a cutting edge, you can see, of around 3.5 inches, a little bit under, so about 3.3 inches of cutting edge, so really good standard serviceable size. Some size comparisons to other things. Well, let's grab the Paramilitary 2. Take a look at that. Lining up the tips, what always happens with the PM2 is that you have a pretty similar overall length, but that blade to handle ratio is very different on the Paramilitary. So we have that. Here is another Spyderco, the Sage. Just sort of grabbing what's nearby. I think a pretty good comparison will be the ZT0393. And of course we have to do the Mini Griptilian. Let's take a look at some other budget Kershaws as well. So here is one called the Thistle. You might be familiar with some of these if you are a Kershaw guy. Here's the Method, one that I really like. And we'll get back into the Epistle later on, because this is part of the Budget Blade series. And the last one I want to show for now is the Weston. And I'm going to take this time to give a shout out. Today's shout out is going to be to my buddy Big Red EDC. His channel is one that I've been following for a while. He and I have been friends for a good long time now. He is a great guy in the community. And the reason why I want to talk about him right now with the Weston on the table is that the Weston is a budget knife that at one point I called it my absolute favorite budget knife. It still really might be. I really, really enjoy this design, and I think Kershaw killed it with this. And he recently picked one up and did a review of it. And I want to link to that down below, because we are we definitely see this knife the same way, and so I definitely appreciated his take on it. And yeah, he does some great stuff in the community as well, guys. He has a live stream on his channel that he does every Saturday called Saturday Knife Live. I'm guessing a lot of you have already heard of him and are subscribed, but if you aren't, definitely swing on over and check him out. A good guy to know, and a good guy to definitely follow and watch his reviews. All right, but that is the Weston compared to the Tarheel. Let's take a look at the weight. This knife is not going to be the lightest knife, but it's certainly not heavy either, even though we do have full stainless steel liners. 3.88 ounces. So yeah, taking a look, there are no extra steps taken on this knife, and I mean at all. In any capacity, no extra steps. This is the most simple execution that you could ever ask for, and that's part of the reason why it is going to be super cheap. What's interesting, though, is even though we do have those full stainless liners, the plastic scales are super light, and it keeps the weight to what I think is a very, very reasonable level. All right. Now, getting into the blade steel, we do have 8CR13 MOV. And that will sort of harken back to the debate about 8CR. Well, we can get it for $15.50 here. You know, why are we going to pay $40, $50 on some knives? And again, as I say so many times, it's in the eye of the beholder. It's all going to be about what you're looking for and the things that you value. And if you just value steel, then this might be the kind of knife where you would be willing to get 8CR because it is super cheap. Taking a look at the blade, it is just a very good sort of classic standard kind of blade shape. You know, it's got a nice little swedge here. It is really easy to start cuts. It doesn't look like it's that pronounced at the tip, but you know, a lot of the cuts that I have to do where I'm like piercing to start the cut, it's perfect for that. It worked just fine. A good amount of belly. Anything more than that at the front would sort of be detrimental in my opinion as to the way that I like to use knives. So this sort of like fits the bill pretty perfectly, and I do like the swedge here. As far as jimping goes, there is none. It is a little bit slick. Using the knife in the capacity I used it, it wasn't an issue whatsoever. Would I have liked some? Absolutely. Do I expect some at this price point? Absolutely not. So that's sort of where we are. As we move on back, the plastic scales here are, I mean, they're fine. There's something about this knife, and I guess I'll get into it now. There's just something about the knife, it just feels cheaper. And it's hard to pinpoint what it is. It's probably a number of things, maybe just like very subtle fitting and action and just sort of the way things go together. When you hold this knife in your hand, even versus something that's budget like this and like this, you know, when you hold the Tarheel, it just feels like it's not on the same level. And again, really, really hard to pinpoint it. It just doesn't feel the same. Now, that said, is it a bad scale that we have here? No, it's not bad at all. Injection molded, it's not going to be particularly grippy. I think that Kershaw has done much better with the traction on plastic scales in the past, and they will continue to do better, but this one is just, it just is what it is. With no like extra kind of effort put into making it great. It just is serviceable. And yeah, maybe I'll say the word serviceable 15 times in this video. But I mean, it works. There's no real sharp spots. So, you know, that isn't an issue at all. And I would say as we move on back to get to the clip, but the clip is actually all the way up here. And this is one of those things that you see a lot of on very cheap knives. You see a clip that blocks the pivot, which I really don't like. It makes it just a pain in the butt. You have to take the clip off in order to start to disassemble the knife. It sort of tells me that whoever buys this knife isn't a knife person. Whoever buys this knife, the person that this knife is marketed to, is someone who's just going to use it and beat it up and try to sharpen it and then maybe eventually just toss it out once they can't use it anymore. You know, it has this more disposable feel, being $15, being something where it doesn't seem user-friendly for disassembly with that clip being there. Maybe I'm looking too far into it, but that's always what I think anytime you have a clip covering up the pivot, at least in this day and age. It is one position, so you're not going to reverse it. So we have tip down. It is nice and relatively deep carry, though. So, yeah. So, I mean, it's a good clip. It's the same clip that, you know, we see here, essentially. Maybe a little different. But, yeah, and then as we continue to go on back, we do have an open frame, which I really do like that. The standoffs here are about as basic as it gets. And yeah, that's really it. No lanyard hole, but with that open frame and the standoff, you could definitely make a lanyard work if you are a lanyard person. So you do have that option. The lockup here is a liner lock. No real movement, maybe just a little bit. I think when I first got it, I had a tiny little bit of up and down, but I was able to just tweak the pivot and get that to tighten up and be just fine. So yeah, I mean, it definitely passes the lockup test. And the action, it's manual, which is always a good thing for people who don't like speed safe. I've already got a little bit of dirt in it, but you can see we have like those nylon Teflon washers. The action is actually pretty good. It's got this detent where once you break it with the, so you can see how far it pops out. Once you break it with the thumb stud, I mean, it really wants to go. So it has a very satisfying action. You can see spider flick right there. So Yeah, the action is really good to open. Not drop shutty, but I mean, it closes nicely. So we do have that, and we do have good centering. So there are a lot of good things about this knife. But the interesting thing for me, again, is that this knife sort of came out of nowhere, being called the Tarheel, not something that was marketed in any way that I saw. And then when you compare it to some of these other knives, you know, and I know that a lot of these that I'm bringing out here, the Weston, the Method, the Thistle, these have all been marked down a lot, so they're all around the $20 range, maybe even less on these knives now, but they were in the $20 to $30 range when they came out. Maybe the Thistle was right at 20. But when you're comparing them and you're making that debate, like, man, why would I pay, you know, 25, 30 bucks for 8CR, or why would I pay 40 bucks for 8CR? I mean, this one right here, the Decibel, is a $35, $40 knife, same steel. Why would I pay that when I can get it for $15.50? It's a good question. It's a good question, and everybody has to answer it their own way. You know, I've answered it my own way, and I've talked about design, and I've talked about, you know, what I'm willing to pay for a knife because I know what I can get out of it and what I need. And so I personally don't think that paying $30 to $40 for 8CR is like out of the ballpark. But right here, you know, with this one, it's definitely about as cheap as you're going to find a Kershaw, that's for sure. But it isn't a perfect knife, you know, and it doesn't feel like a perfect knife. And it's hard to highlight those things in this video because it's one of those things where you just really need to get it in hand. You know, the grind isn't perfect. It's a little bit off and wonky there. But again, these are like minor details that someone who picks up this knife wants a Kershaw. They want it for 15 to 16 bucks, and they're going to use it. They're going to sharpen the heck out of it. Then they're going to use it some more and sharpen it and use it and sharpen it some more. And maybe they're going to chip it and break it and snap the tip. They're going to hard use the knife at some point, maybe use it in a way that most knife people wouldn't, or they're going to, you know, pry with it and screw up the lockup, and they're just going to say, all right, screw it. I got to go get a new knife. And that's sort of who this knife I think is for. You know, it's not really meant for the people who are looking for something nicer. I think it's meant maybe as like one of those transition knives for people who are maybe getting into knives. You can get your first Kershaw for a cheap price, and then do a little research and find some more Kershaws that would interest you and sort of start that slippery slope of the addiction. But it's also something that I think would be appropriate if you just needed something for a backup into a kit, have something in your car all the time, or if you wanted to have a knife that you gifted to a friend, you know, someone who needs a knife, but they don't really need anything too fancy. This would definitely be a good one. You know, it could be a knife that you let people borrow when, you know, they needed, then when someone else needs a knife and you don't want to give them your nice knife. You know, there's a lot that this could be good for, even though I don't think that it stands up versus some of the other even budget stuff from Kershaw. Functionally, it should be right up there with it. Durability, can't say, haven't really experienced that. Ask me in a year or two if I still have the thing, you know. So when it comes to the budget kind of quest to see what is the best budget knife, where does this stack up versus the other ones we've been looking at? It's interesting because, you know, it's under $30 is what I'm talking about, and this one is half that price. So when you think about it, it really could appeal to a completely different group of people. You know, $30 is one thing, but it's almost twice the price of what you're going to pay for this. So some of these knives on here, you'd almost get two of the new Kershaw for the price of a couple of these. So yeah, it just makes for an interesting debate, and it also goes to show that, you know, there are different levels of budget. So where would this go? You know, where would this fit in with all the things on the list? I'm trying to squeeze everything in here. I've got another Ganzo that sort of gets shoehorned in. Honestly, as far as me liking the knife, this one goes at the bottom, and it's not even really a question. I think the 511, just in the time that I've used it, has moved up the list, and the Epistle has sort of moved down. But as far as what I'm looking for, and as far as, you know, how the knife feels, yeah, it's not really going to be anything special. You know, it's not a special knife. It's not a great knife. But it is, for a lot of people, I think, going to be a good use of 16 bucks. So it's interesting to have a review that is not a great positive review, but at the end of the day, still have a positive outcome just because of what that difference in value and that difference of price point can really do. All right, guys, so that's my take on it. I mean, this is sort of my list of the Budget Blade series and what's what at this point. So any questions, comments, complaints, suggestions, let me know. If you have any more detail about this model and where it came from and why it sort of just snuck up on people and wasn't announced really to any degree, or maybe it was and I missed it, let me know in the comments down below as well. But thanks for watching, guys, and take care. I will talk with you soon. Have a good one.